Mitch Tischler on a Tischler Tuesday, joining us for his usual hit. Mitchell, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I am doing well. Happy Hanukkah to you.
Happy holidays to everybody. How about that?
Happy Merry everything. Sunday happened. Man, there is so much to get into. Let me start here with you because we spend so much time talking about Jayden because of the big plays and the spectacular things he does, the unprecedented nature of his moxie and everything as a rookie. After the first 7 carries, which were terrible for the Commanders' defense, they allowed Saquon Barkley 41 yards on 22 carries. They hit him behind the line of scrimmage 13 of 22 times. How do you think that they made that adjustment, and how much of that is what they did versus whatever factor Jalen Hurts' absence played?
I mean, obviously a big portion of that is Jalen Hurts being out. But I've been just so impressed this season with everything that Joe Witt has done. You see him trying to find the pieces that work in different situations with this defense. And I'm talking kind of big picture from the start of the season until today. But this weekend against Philly, the changes that he made to that defense after that first kind of quarter and change of time. And yeah, part of it is the fact that you're going against Kenny Pickett, but you can only play against the guys who are in front of you. And if Kenny Pickett had gone out there and picked apart this defense and, given them a ton of points, I think we would have been speaking differently. But you saw a lot of those early runs were to the left side of the Eagles offense, the right side of the Commanders defense. And I think you saw them kind of tamp down on that right side. And ultimately you saw Joe Witt and bring a bunch of those kind of cluster blitzes where you throw too many blitzers at, an offensive line where they can't block all those guys. And ultimately you're able to do that because Kenny Pickett is the quarterback. But let's be honest, we've watched Commanders, Washington football, Redskins defenses for years not make in-game adjustments. And the fact that they were able to do that and hold Philly to the amount of, to the lack of offense that they were for the last kind of 2.5 quarters of that game is super impressive. And, this season is obviously still very much alive, and there's a lot of things that this team is looking forward to. But, man, big picture, I am so excited about having Joe Witt running this defense as we go forward.
I totally agree, and I think he's just continued to get better. And I think, earlier in the year, I think we talked about this, like you and I, but I know we talked about it, big picture we on the show, that Joe's a first-time coordinator, and it was going to take some mistakes on his part to learn certain things because he had just never done the play-calling thing and been in charge of a defense with live bullets flying. And I think some of the mistakes he makes early, and again, that's not to criticize Joe, it's to acknowledge the human nature of how hard it is to be an NFL defensive coordinator and that coaches can get better too. And I think the fact that he, like so many pieces of this team, Mitch, have gotten better this quickly is so exciting to think about what they can continue to be moving forward when they can just continue to innovate, they can continue to try new things, and they also learn more about themselves each and every season, like every game, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, listen, having Marshawn Lattimore out there is a massive upgrade and change for this defense. And, I think the fact that they were able to do some of the things that they did with him in terms of leaving him one-on-one with A.J. Brown as much as they did, frees up a lot of the rest of that defense to do other things. And, I don't know if you guys have talked about Richard Sherman on his podcast going through a couple of the PI calls that Lattimore got and kind of the nature of how tough it is to be a DB in the NFL doing that. But, I think that, you saw early in the season players in position to make plays. You saw them get their hands on the ball, on outbreaking passes or over the middle, and they just kind of quite weren't able to, to pull in those interceptions. And that's something that we've seen Dan Quinn, Joe Witt talk about since the beginning of the season, the importance of that. And I think part of that is, just kind of total talent level on defense is only at a certain level. You're only able to upgrade so many positions, and bringing in Marshawn Lattimore is a pretty big upgrade over their corner. And I expect that kind of his influence on the rest of the defense we'll be able to see it kind of radiate throughout the defense. And hopefully, Mikey Sainristil can continue to play at the level that he's playing and continue to to get better. But man, the ingenuity, the different ways that Joe Witt attacks offenses is just kind of different than what we've seen, particularly over the last 4 years or so. And when Jack Del Rio was running it, it's something that fans should be excited about. And I think we'll continue to see this defense improve, not just the last 2 weeks of this season as we get into the playoff season, but also as we start looking down the road in the next 1, 2, 3 years or so.
Mitch Tischler, co-host of the Beltway Football Podcast, with us here on the Hoffman Show. Mitch, I'm going to ask you a question that Anthony asked me earlier, which is, what's your concern level on the running game being so unproductive outside of Jayden Daniels the last 2 weeks?
I mean, I think there's good reason for there to be concern. I mean, Jayden Daniels just passed Brian Robinson for most rushing yards to lead the team in rushing yards this season. But I hate to have this be the theme, but just as I was impressed with the in-game changes that Joe Witt was able to do, you have to be impressed with the in-game changes that Cliff Kingsbury brought to the table. Because you saw when they came out from halftime, they recognized they weren't able to run the ball. And yes, that's a concern. And yes, that's something that needs to get fixed. That's something that, I think they can get to. But I love seeing this offense come out and play, 4 and 5 wide, no tight ends, running backs motioning out of the backfield, put the Eagles on their heels. And when you have a quarterback like Jayden Daniels that you can trust to both get the offensive line into the right protection, but also understand that he's a guy who can beat a free blitzer himself, you're able to get creative like that and do those things. But to get back to the run game, I think early in the season there was a lot of misdirection, a lot of confusion with how they were pulling offensive linemen and, opposite of the direction of the play, and teams, I think, struggled with that a little bit. And I think teams have kind of recognized that that's a big part of their run game is the misdirection. And, if you're pulling a guard and if you're running to the right side and you're pulling your right guard and right tackle to the left, and teams aren't going to flow with that motion, you're going to have a tough time running the ball because that's 2 less blockers you have, leading that play. And so I think there needs to be a little more. I think the running game was super creative early, but now you need to get to mix in a little bit more of the basics, mix in a little bit more of the lead, the guard pulls, the leads, the edge rushes that they had success with early in the season, and start working in that as opposed to relying on misdirection to trick teams into being able to run the ball.
I think it's a really, really great point. The other element of the running game that's missing is Austin Eckler, and they had some very specific things that Austin was very good at, even if it wasn't their base, like first and second down runs. Do you think that there's a chance we see Luke McCaffrey on any of the Austin Eckler package, even if it's more of the screen stuff than the running back stuff, considering what he's shown in the kick return game and the excitement that was in Dan Quinn's voice yesterday and when DQ was talking about Luke and what they saw in the kick return game?
Certainly in the kick return game, yes. If you rewind 2 weeks to the goal line play when Cam Jordan gets a free run at Jayden Daniels on the goal line there, that was because of a Luke McCaffrey missed assignment, I guess I would say, in part. But I think that you're seeing the importance of a player like Noah Brown, who's able to be, to be gritty in the run game at a wide receiver, and I think that's a big part of it. Hopefully, when KJ Osborne is able to get going for this team, he's able to pick up a little bit of that grit. I think Luke McCaffrey is. We see him get open week after week after week on the field. I mean, he had 3 passes thrown to him, and 2 of them were turned into interceptions, but 2 of them were bad throws by Jayden Daniels, and not Luke's fault. That the interception happened, especially that big play over the middle. I mean, if Jayden gets that ball down, just over the linebacker, but in front of the safety to Luke, that's going for 25, 30 yards. I think that he's a little bit at this point in his career as a wide receiver. I think he's a little bit more skilled in the route running game as opposed to being a physical blocker. Not necessarily because he doesn't want to do it. I just don't think he quite has the skill, hasn't quite figured out, as a player at his size, how to be effective blocking, linebackers or other defensive players in the running game.
Yeah, I'm just curious if like some of the orbit motion stuff they're using Zacchaeus on, if that becomes Luke, because like the screen he ran last week was great. Ozzy had a hell of a block on it too, but just to get him in space, I think is intriguing, as opposed to asking him to do the route running and all that kind of stuff. But we'll see. They've got 2 weeks to play with it. Obviously, they need to win one of these games to get in. Sunday Night Football up next. Mitchell, see you Sunday night in Landover.
Sounds good. I'm excited for it. I'll just say real quick, I don't know that Luke is that much more explosive than OZ in those motion packages, but it is going to be interesting to see how they parse out some of those spatial passes as we go forward.
Yeah, definitely. All right, man. Have a great holiday. Enjoy it. We're listening to you and JP on the Beltway Football Show, and I'll see you Sunday night at Northwest Stadium.
You do the same, bud. Thanks.